Beneath the molten gold of the African sun, where the air shimmers with heat and the wind carries whispers of life and death, a moment was unfolding that would test the deepest boundaries between predator and prey, and between pain and mercy. It began when a lion cub, barely old enough to face the wild's cruelty, became trapped under the crushing weight of a fallen tree. But what followed would defy every law of the savannah, because the cub's mother did something no one in the wild could have predicted. She turned not to her pride, not to her own strength, but to an old enemy. And the one she asked for help, a silverback gorilla named Bakari, had every reason to walk away. The righteous care for the needs of their animals, but the kindest acts of the wicked are cruel. The early afternoon light poured like molten bronze across the endless plains, the sky painted in soft blues and blinding whites. Tall, spindly acacia trees stood like ancient sentinels, their seed pods dangling heavy in the sweltering breeze. Birds called in the distance, warthogs trotted through brittle grass, and the land seemed to breathe with a slow, peaceful rhythm. But peace in the wild is fragile, it can shatter in an instant. Near the gnarled remains of a fallen acacia, a lioness stood like a queen carved from muscle and scars, her eyes scanning the horizon, her flank bearing the memory of past battles. In the golden dust at her feet, her cub played, pouncing on drifting leaves, batting at shadows, tail flicking in joy. Then the air changed. A gust of wind ripped through the plain, tearing pods from branches and sending spirals of dust skyward. The birds erupted in alarm, their shrieks slicing through the calm. The earth gave a subtle groan, and then a terrible crack. One of the elder acacias, weakened by time and storms, surrendered to gravity. A massive branch, thick as a man's torso, snapped free and plummeted toward the ground. The lioness roared, but she was too far. The limb struck with a sound like thunder, sending up a choking cloud of dust. And then came a cry, faint, strangled, desperate. Her cub was trapped beneath the branch, pinned in a cruel prison of wood and earth. She lunged, teeth and claws tearing at the limb, muscles straining, but the weight would not yield. The cub whimpered, its body twisted, tail dragging. The lioness' chest heaved, her heart a drum of panic. Alone in the vastness, no help in sight, she circled the tree, frantic. Two are better than one. If either of them falls down, one can help the other up. From the brush, a sound broke the silence, heavy, deliberate, and steady. A shadow emerged into the light, broad-chested, dark-furred, towering in stillness. A silverback gorilla. His name was Bakari, and he had not stood this close to a lion in many, many seasons. He lived now in self-imposed exile, deep in thorny thickets where the sun barely touched the ground, far from the memories that haunted him, but the sight before him pierced the armor he had built around his soul. Years ago, he too had known what it was to cradle the fragile life of a child beneath the branches of these same acacias. That day, long ago, he had been with his mate, and their young when a lioness, fierce and swift, ambushed them. The memory was a wound that never closed, his mate's scream, the flash of teeth and the crushing silence when his child's small body lay still beneath fallen limbs. He had lifted branches that day with all the strength his body could give, but he had been too late. From that moment he had turned his back on lions, and on the parts of himself that could still feel. Now as he locked eyes with the lioness, he saw not a predator, but a parent. She growled, her stance fierce, but it was a shield for something else. Her gaze flicked from her cub to him, and the fight in her softened. With a trembling breath, she rose on her hind legs, bracing herself against the fallen tree, a posture both of strength and surrender. Then she lowered herself beside her cub, her shoulders slumped, as she let out a cry, not of rage, but of desperation. It was the sound of a mother on the edge of losing everything. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Bakari's breath was slow, his great chest rising and falling as if weighing every possibility. His hands curled into fists, not in anger, but in the grip of memory. The lioness' cry was too familiar. It echoed the one that had torn from his own throat years before. The cub whimpered, tail twitching once before stilling. The dust clung to its fur like ash, its small chest struggling for air. In the stillness, Bakari turned. He stepped away from the clearing, his massive form disappearing into the tall grass. The lioness head jerked up, her eyes followed him, hope flickering and dying in the same breath. She let out another cry, this one raw, hopeless, final, the sound of someone watching the last chance slip away. She thought he had abandoned her, but Bakari did not walk far. Just beyond sight of the clearing, he sank onto a shaded mound. The earth cooled beneath him. His fingers dug into the soil as the past flooded him, the broken branches, the shattered canopy, the silence where laughter had been. His eyes closed. The lioness cries reached him again, softer now, less a call for aid and more a song of sorrow. Carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. In the clearing, the lioness curled herself protectively around her cub, her body a shield against a world that could crush without warning. The cub's breaths came shallow, its tiny body twitching. The heat pressed down like an unforgiving hand. The grass swayed, the horizon shimmered, and the silence began to settle, the silence that means an ending. Then, faint at first, the ground trembled. A dry branch snapped under the weight of something large. The lioness head lifted. Ears forward, through the dust, a shadow grew. Bakari stepped back into the clearing. His eyes were locked on the fallen branch, and the lines in his face carried the weight of a decision already made. Bakari's return was not the march of a conqueror, nor the stealth of a hunter. It was the slow, deliberate approach of someone, carrying both the weight of grief and the fragile spark of hope. Each step pressed deep into the dust, his massive hands curling and uncurling as though already feeling the branch's resistance. The sun caught in his fur, highlighting scars along his arms, reminders that he, too, had fought for life in moments where the odds were cruel. The lioness watched him, her muscles coiled, but her growl never came. Something in her eyes shifted, as if she recognized this was no enemy now, but an answer to the prayer she had never thought she'd make. The cub's tiny breaths rattled in the silence, and even the wind seemed to still. Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. The silverback stopped just short of the fallen tree. He studied the branch, gauging the depth of the earth where it had wedged itself. His nostrils flared, not at the scent of lion, but at the scent of fear thick in the air. His massive hands gripped the wood, fingers splaying wide. He remembered the weight of branches like these years ago, how they had crushed the breath from the one he loved. But this time there was still a heartbeat to save. His muscles bunched, sinew rippling beneath dark fur as he braced his legs in the dust. The lioness leaned back, pressing her body against her cub to shield it from what was to come, her tail sweeping around in a protective arc. The savannah seemed to hold its breath. Even the birds in the distance went silent. Do not withhold. Good from those to whom it is due, when it is in your power to act. With a guttural breath, Bakari pulled. The branch groaned but held, as though the earth itself was reluctant to release its grip. Dust rose in thin spirals from beneath his feet. His arms strained, veins standing out like twisted cords, his jaw clenched. He adjusted his stance, teeth bared, not in rage, but in sheer, unrelenting effort. The lioness' ears flicked back at the sound of the wood cracking, the scent of fresh splinters mixing with the warm air, then a sharp snap. The branch shifted, just enough for a beam of sunlight to strike the cub's fur. Encouraged, Bakari heaved again, the muscles in his shoulders rolling like waves. The branch lifted higher, and the lioness moved fast, sliding her forelimbs beneath her cub, drawing it free. The moment it was clear, Bakari let the branch drop with a dull thud, the sound echoing like a drumbeat across the empty plain. Rescue the weak and the needy. Deliver them from the hand of the wicked? The cub's body was limp at first, its head lolling, eyes closed. The lioness bent low, her nose pressing into its side, breathing in rapid bursts. She licked its fur in frantic strokes, trying to warm what the shadow of the branch had chilled. For a heartbeat, nothing changed, and then a cough, small but fierce, broke the silence. The cub's legs twitched, then stretched, its eyes fluttered open, glazed but alive. The lioness froze as if afraid to believe it, then bent to nuzzle. Her cub again, her chest rising with a deep, relieved growl. It was not the roar of a hunter, but the hum of life restored. Bakari stepped back, his breathing heavy but slowing, his gaze locked on the small creature he had pulled back from the brink. For the first time in years, he felt something more than the ache of loss. He felt the quiet, healing pulse of redemption. He heals the broken-hearted and binds up their wounds. Their eyes met across the dust. The lioness held her cub close, her golden gaze steady. It was not the glare of rivalry, but something older, deeper, the silent language of those who have walked through the same fire. She dipped her head, a small, deliberate movement that in the world of predators and prey could mean many things, but here it meant only one: gratitude. No roar, no growl, no sound at all, just a gesture that crossed the boundary between species. Bakari gave a small nod in return, then turned toward the brush. He had come to this clearing burdened with a memory that had driven him into solitude. Now he left carrying a different one, not of failure, but of a life saved. The grass swayed to hide him as he disappeared, his massive shadow melting back into the thorns. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. Behind him, the lioness settled into the grass, her cub pressed against her side, its tiny paw resting on her foreleg. The golden light deepened, shadows lengthening across the savannah. Somewhere in the distance, the warthogs continued their slow journey, and the wind began its soft whisper again. But in this small circle of earth beneath the acacias, something had shifted, not just for the lioness, not just for the cub, but for the silverback who had answered a cry he could have ignored. In the wild, survival often demands the hard choice to turn away, but sometimes mercy is the stronger law. And sometimes, even the most unlikely of hands can lift the weight of the world from another's back. Be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other, just as in Christ God forgave you. He walked with purpose, slow, deliberate, and heavy with a shadow of quiet strength, as if each step was tied to something deeper than the earth beneath him. The late afternoon sun bled gold across the savannah, turning the tall grass into a sea of fire that swayed and whispered in the wind. Bakari, the great silverback, returned to the scene with the weight of memory pressing on his broad shoulders. Every movement was measured, deliberate, his massive frame radiating an unspoken resolve. The lioness, her fur dusted with the ochre of the plains, did not move to stop him. She stood utterly still, her golden eyes locked on him, her breathing quick but steady. Before him lay the fallen limb of an ancient acacia, a gnarled, heavy branch that had come crashing down, trapping the fragile body of a lion cub beneath it. Bakari's gaze swept across the scene, eyes sharp and searching, then softened with something almost human in its ache. Slowly, he lowered himself to one knee, his fists pressing into the dry earth as if drawing strength from it. He took in a deep breath, then another, muscles tightening like drawn steel, his chest expanded, shoulders rolling forward. Then, with a low, guttural growl that seemed to come from the very heart of the wild, Bakari began to lift. The branch groaned under its own ancient weight, its bark cracking in protest, dust cascading from its weathered surface. Inch by inch it rose. His back arched, his arms trembled, veins standing out like rivers in a drought. The lioness moved forward now, her instincts igniting like fire. She pressed her muzzle to the cub's head, her body language clear. Now. The cub whimpered, a soft, broken sound, and began to drag itself forward, its tiny claws scraping the brittle grass. Just as it cleared the trap, Bakari let the branch fall. The earth shook with the deep, final thud, a sound that rippled through the clearing and far into the distance. Somewhere beyond the trees, a dust trail marked the approach of a ranger's vehicle. The righteous care for the needs of their animals, but the kindest acts are written deepest in the heart. The sound of that branch falling seemed to stir the air itself, carrying with it a subtle shift in the rhythm of the savannah. Bakari stood still, chest heaving in great waves, breath burning through him. The lioness bent to her cub, licking him frantically as if trying to restore life with every stroke of her tongue. The little one trembled beneath her touch, weak but alive. And then it came, a faint mechanical hum, faint at first but growing louder as it crested the far ridge. A beige Land Cruiser emerged into view, weaving through the scattered trees. At the wheel sat Ranger Elijah Manji, binoculars raised, scanning the clearing with a sharp, practiced eye. His khaki shirt was plastered to his skin with sweat, his brow furrowed with deep concern. But when he froze, utterly still, it wasn't from fear of the wild, it was disbelief. Ahead of him stood a lioness over her cub, and beside them, a silverback gorilla, watching in silence. Elijah's hand moved slowly to the ignition, turning the key until the engine died. The sudden quiet fell heavy. He stepped out with the reverence of a man entering a sacred place, every muscle tuned to respect. The lioness watched him, her gaze shifting from the cub to Bakari, then back again. And then, in an act no field manual could ever prepare him for, she stepped aside. Not in fear, in trust. Elijah blinked against the heat and the disbelief, then crouched beside the cub. Its ribs rose and fell unevenly, a small body fighting to hold on. One leg was twisted at a wrong angle. He touched its side gently, murmuring soft words as if they could hold the cub together. Fracture. Maybe two, he whispered. Reaching for his radio, he pressed the call button. Unit 5, this is Manji. Cub is alive. Leg injury. Need vet assistance immediately. Static crackled then. Copy that. 10 minutes out. Behind him, Bakari began to back away, retreating into the shade of the thorny brush, his dark eyes never leaving the cub. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Elijah's hands moved with the precision of a man used to. Cradling life. He slipped a soft sling beneath the cub's fragile body, the animal giving a small, exhausted mewl but still alert enough to look at him with those wide amber eyes. Slowly, he lifted the cub, holding it against his chest, as though the heartbeat between them could pass strength from one to the other. He carried it to the vehicle and set it gently inside on a canvas bed. Behind him, the lioness followed. Silent as a shadow, each step weighted with the dignity of a mother who had seen the brink of loss and stepped back from it. There was no snarl, no protest, only an unspoken acknowledgement between two protectors of life. The door clicked shut. The engine turned over. As the truck began to roll away, Elijah glanced in the rearview mirror. The lioness trotted behind. At a steady pace, her golden coat shimmering in the sun, as if escorting her child home. At the very edge of the grove, Bakari stood, still, unmoving, his eyes tracking the trail of dust until it dissolved into the horizon. Slowly, the savannah began to breathe again. Grass bent and swayed with the wind. Birds circled lazily in the thermals above. And Bakari turned and walked back toward his hollow, a shaded pocket of earth where no human foot dared tread. Two are better than one, for if either of them falls, one can help the other up. It was beneath the twisted arms of an ancient acacia that Bakari settled once more. Around him lay the relics of seasons past, sun-bleached bones, faded tufts, of fur, and the kind of silence that grows roots in the soul. He had sat here before, long ago, when loss had carved a hollow in him that no time could fill. Back then the moment had broken him, the weight of a fallen branch, the cry of a dying child he could not save. But today was different. Today he had faced the same trial, the same cruel echo of the past, and this time he had lifted. This time the child had lived. His breathing slowed, his shoulders eased, and for the first time in many seasons his chest felt lighter. Far off, the ranger's truck rolled steadily toward the veterinary outpost. The cub nestled in canvas, its tiny sides rising and falling with the stubborn rhythm of survival. Elijah drove in silence, his mirror still showing the lioness in the distance, graceful and unyielding in her vigil. She did not roar, did not growl. Her gratitude was written in her steady presence. Back beneath the acacia, Bakari leaned against the thick trunk. The sun still burned high, scattering gold across the endless grasslands, each flicker of leaf above him whispering that the day had been worth the weight it carried. And finally, he closed his eyes, not in grief, but in peace. Even in the wild, pride must sometimes kneel, and pain must give way to compassion. And sometimes the strongest hands belong not to the loudest roar, but to the quiet heart willing to forgive. If this powerful act of mercy moved you, help us share the beauty of wildlife compassion. Like this video, subscribe to our channel, and tell us in the comments, what would you do if you had to choose between old pain and saving a life?